He lost all his men in the battle against zombies and marauders. Hello all. This is Jacobson and this is a brief retelling of the 3rd and 4th episodes of the 8th season of the zombie series The Walking Dead. You can see the previous episodes at the links in the video description. As soon as this video gets 300 likes, I will release the next part. Enjoy watching it.
In the depths of the forest, he gathers and motivates his soldiers, of whom there are more than 3 dozen, for the upcoming attack on the nearby outpost of the Saviors. And I am sure that if they stick to the plan, they will not lose a single person. Later, Ezekiel leads a small part of his regiment through the forest, where they soon hear the terrifying coordinated whistling of the Saviors. They quickly encounter a group of about 20 Saviors who hold them at gunpoint. Carol comes out of the long grass with the rest of the inhabitants of the kingdom and shoots at the Saviors from behind, and Iskill's group falls to its knees and also opens fire, killing them all and not receiving losses. Meanwhile, in the office outpost, Rico is held at gunpoint by Morales, who orders him to disarm, realizing that he is the same Rick from Alexandria that the Saviors told about. He calls Rick a monster and reports that Negan has ordered Rick, the widow, and the king to be spared if possible. The battle continues outside. The Saviors are suffering more and more losses. They receive Morales' order to return inside and immediately carry it out, killing 2 people that Rick and Daryl took with them. Aaron helps the seriously wounded Eric to move away from the fight and leans him against a tree. The bullet went right through his stomach. He tells the frustrated Aaron to return to the fight, which he reluctantly does. Elsewhere, the Hilltop and Alexandria forces that attacked the satellite outpost are escorting captured and shackled Saviors along a road guarded by armed guards. Jared annoys Morgan with a loud whistle. Jesus notices that they are not far from the hilltop, but Morgan is still angry about the decision to spare the lives of the Saviors. Jesus insists that it was the right thing to do regardless, telling him that no matter what they did, they are still human. He firmly says they don't execute people. Back at the office outpost, Rick asks about Morales' family, and Morales tells him that they died on the way to Birmingham shortly after they left the rest of the group. Morales refuses to accept Rick's sympathy, even when he talks about the many people he has also lost. Rick talks about Glenn's horrific death at the hands of Negan and how Glenn and Maggie met during the apocalypse, much to Morales' surprise. Morales tells him that after the death of his family, he lost his mind and that on the way north he was found by rescuers who gave him a sense of purpose, as they saw value in him. Thus, he declares himself a Negan and tells Rick that they are the same, 2 jerks ready to do anything to survive. At that moment, Daryl appears behind Morales and, despite Rick's protests, shoots him in the face with a bolt when he turns around. Daryl asks if he found the gun, and Rick says no. As they are about to leave, the surviving Saviors attack outside. Along the way, Jared continues to annoy Morgan, eventually mocking Benjamin's death. When Morgan breaks down and holds him at gunpoint, several walkers fall from the embankment onto the road leading to the column, and the horror begins. 2 Saviors are killed, and while the militia members are concerned about the threat, a group of 10 Saviors led by Jared tries to escape by running into the woods. Morgan gives chase, shooting at them while fleeing. When he catches up with them, he kills the one who made them slow down, and only the intervention of Jesus stops him from executing the others. Diana and 3 other militiamen accompany the Saviors to the road, and Jesus tries to reason with Morgan, who insists that the Saviors do not want and cannot change. He starts to lose his temper, ranting about how nothing is changing. He insists that the militias must become murderers, as well as Saviors, in order to survive. Jesus says that after winning the war they will have to find a way to live together with the Saviors, but Morgan refuses to listen. He attacks Jesus, who dodges his punches and kicks him back. Morgan forms his Aikido and attacks again. Ezekiel reminds his soldiers that the Saviors they just dealt with were only 1 garrison out of 3. Later, they quietly deal with 3 guards standing outside the building occupied by the Saviors, and then enter it and kill the inhabitants of the outpost. Soon after, they ambush a second group of about 40 Saviors and kill them all. At the office outpost, Rick and Daryl are trapped in a hallway with 6 rescuers. Morgan and Jesus continue to fight. He manages to dodge Morgan's punches with his stick and use the openings left by him to wear him down. However, Morgan refuses to stop. He tries in vain to deliver several fatal blows, but Jesus dodges and gets to his feet, knocking the increasingly unstable Morgan to the ground. He uses the trees as cover to dodge most of Morgan's punches, but ends up being knocked to the ground. Jesus manages to get to his feet and disarm his opponent, beating him off with another blow. Jesus returns the staff to Morgan, who immediately puts it to his throat when Tara and Diana appear. Morgan finally comes out of his trance, confused by what he has done. He comes to the conclusion that he cannot be part of the war and leaves on his own. Meanwhile, Rick and Daryl are running out of ammo. Rick shoots the fire extinguisher, creating a cover to destroy the saviors at close range, while Aaron and the militia stay with the supporting fire, killing the remaining saviors. At the hilltop, Neat is on guard when he notices Gregory arriving in the car he took from Gabriel at the shelter. He begs to be let back in. Maggie meets him at the gate, and Gregory lies that he found the car empty, and arrogantly tells her that he built a hilltop long before Maggie arrived. Maggie furiously tells him to shut up and stop pretending he wasn't trying to sell the community to Negan. He protests that he was trying to save lives, but Maggie tells him that people are fighting for a better life. She calls him a coward and reports that Cal told them that Gregory wanted to warn Negan about the militia's intention to fight. Cal sticks his head out from behind the wall and gives Gregory the middle finger. Maggie decides to leave Gregory alone outside the walls, but changes her mind when he desperately begs for mercy, saying that he was scared and not sure that they can win the fight against the saviors. He apologizes and makes a scene. After listening to his pitiful screams, she lets him into the house, telling Annette that he is not worth killing. At this time, there is a group of Jesus with the captured saviors. Gregory immediately insists they can't stay, but Maggie sends him away while she talks to Jesus. Tara says she agrees that they can't stay, and Maggie remarks that since there are families and children in the hilltop, such an agreement would be dangerous. Jesus insists that they cannot kill those who have surrendered and plans to keep them under armed guard in 2 empty trailers. The battle in the office ends. This is the victory of the militia. Numerous revived saviors are defeated. Vic takes Polaroid photos of the carnage. Wounded militia soldiers are taken away in a pickup truck, and the dead are being prepared for burial. Aaron returns to where he left Eric, but discovers that he has disappeared. In the distance, he sees the animated corpse of his boyfriend, walking towards the herd. He breaks down in fits of sobbing, and is led away by cattle. Rick retrieves Gracie from the building, and Aaron volunteered to take her to Hilltop, as he planned to go there with Eric after the battle to inform Maggie. Rick and Daryl are preparing to break up, with Rick intending to talk to the scavengers alone. They are fired at by a lone savior, the one hiding behind a tree. Rick persuades him to surrender, promising his safety if he tells them where the missing heavy guns are. He gives him his word. The one wounded during the battle cautiously comes out and reports that heavy machine guns M2 were transported to Gavin's outpost in the west the day before. Daryl shoots him, much to Rick's surprise. He notices that Ezekiel's forces are at Gavin's outpost. There, Daniel reports to Keel that they did not suffer any losses during the assault. He is glad of this news and tells it to Carol, who continues to be cautious and tells him that they need to comb the camp to make sure there are no survivors. He agrees and lets Carol take command. While his men begin to destroy the saviors when they begin to come to life, and Ezekiel tells Daniel that either they or the saviors. He notices a window in one of the buildings and realizes that they are being watched. He shouts for his troops to run away when the rescuers begin showering them with bullets from heavy machine guns M2. His closest advisors quickly knock him to the ground, covering him from a hail of bullets, as they themselves sacrifice their lives during an ambush. In the flash about the kingdom, we see how they are preparing for the upcoming war with the saviors. Ezekiel puts on his royal attire before meeting with the townspeople. His soldiers say goodbye to their families before going into battle. We return to the present. Bodies are lying on the ground. The entire army of the kingdom has been destroyed. The hand and/or sticks out from under the pile of bodies that covered him from the attack. After getting out, upset, he sees his former soldiers on the ground, torn apart by a hail of bullets. He stops over Daniel's body, letting out a cry of despair, and then notices that some of the fallen inhabitants of the kingdom have begun to come to life, including Daniel. Suffering from a severe wound in the leg and finding that most of his dead have few bullets in their weapons, he can only crawl away, but he is saved by Elvira, who managed to survive the onslaught. He helps him get back on his feet. At the outpost, the rescuers pack machine guns into crates to transfer them to the shelter. Carol approaches from the hallway and hides when she hears another savior urging the other saviors to work faster. When they all gather in the meeting room, they are suddenly shot. Carol walks down the ceiling panels. As she lays down the remaining saviors, she is spotted by another group, which causes her to hastily flee. The men decide to ignore her, preferring to transport weapons. When Elvira helps Daniel to walk, he is suddenly ambushed and shot in the chest by another savior, who captures Ezekiel and forces him to go in another direction, Cavanpost. Gunther reveals his plan to accompany or to the sanctuary. Reminds him that the fences were destroyed, and the complex itself was captured. However, Gunther decides that Ezekiel can be his way of solving the problem, forcing him to help with transporting machine guns to the camp. While they are not walking, they are being chased by a large herd of walkers. Carol manages to catch up with the second group of rescuers as they begin loading heavy weapons into a truck. Gunther pushes too hard as a result, he falls due to an injured leg. Refuses to allow Gunther or the rulers to use him against his people, but Gunther insults the royals, after which he stands on Ezekiel's foot and forces him to rise. On the way, Gunther condemns the title of IKEA and the way of life of the kingdom, stating that under his royal appearance and manners there is some senseless fraudster in a suit. Carol tries to ambush the Savior's team, but two of them open fire on her, forcing her to take cover. Gunther and Il reach the outer fence of the outpost. While Gunther is looking for a way inside or trying to get his sword, but it turns out to be incapacitated, and the weapon is taken away from him again. Gunther marks Ezekiel's face with 2 or 3 bloody lines and mocks him, then leads him further along the fence. Carol is cornered by the rescuers, who continue to pour bullets into her shelter. Gunther get to the main gate, where he discovers to his horror that the gate is padlocked. And he notices that a herd is approaching them, and asks him to return his sword, offering to fight with them together. Instead, Gunther rips off his overcoat, intending to use it to climb over the razor wire fence and get to the outpost. Ezekiel protests, reminding him of his wounded leg, but Gunther knocks him to the ground, stating that although Negan intended to chain the 3 militia leaders to the shelter fence, he decided to take matters into his own hands by beheading the physicist and impaling his head on a pike. As he gloats and raises his sword from the keel, he hears a scream before he is completely cut off with one swing of Jerry's axe. Hiding from the shots, Carol looks up and notices a button activating a nearby gate. She slowly disarms herself and, having played a show, offers to inform the rescuers about the whereabouts of her comrades. Jerry, beaten by the war, helps Ezekiel to get to his feet and props him up against the fence. He puts down 2 former inhabitants of the kingdom with the sword of Ezekiel, and then returns it to him with the words "Your Majesty." Discouraged by Gunther's taunts and insults, he condemns it, but Jerry insists that he continue to assign this title. He takes his axe and starts hitting the chain on the gate. Deciding to accept Carol's offer, Yaga, the team leader, asks where her people are. Carol lingers long enough to neutralize one of the rescuers who approached her. She takes Joey hostage and demands that they lower their weapons. Joey begs Yag to obey, but he is ignored and immediately shot at him, trying to kill Carol. Carol presses a nearby button to open the gate, allowing a group of walkers to come in for the rescuers, which takes them by surprise. Jerry continues to rock the chain, but finds that it does not break. In a last attempt to break through the chain, he pushes the handle of the axe through the chain and tries to tear it off, but at the same time breaks off the head of the axe. The men discover that the herd is approaching them. Having no time to open the gate, both men decide to fight off the herd. Carol re-equips herself and takes the key ring from Joey's body. 2 of the saviors die at the hands of walkers, distracting the attention of Yag and the other saviors from Carol. Izki or Jerry begin to fight off the advancing herd. Jerry takes a moment to thank Ezekiel for being such a cool dude before continuing the carnage. After the two remaining saviors destroy most of the walkers, they hide from Carol's shots. She declares that both sides must end their conflict here and now, and confirms that their weapons are not reaching the target. She moves there to finish them off, but discovers that Jerry is in danger too. And Jerry continues to fight with the herd, but begins to get tired. Carol decides to help them by slaughtering half of the herd with Joseph's rifle, while the two saviors leave with machine guns. When Carol opens the gate, Ezekiel asks about heavy weapons. Carol replies that nothing can be done with them at the moment. And, upset by this discovery, decides to warn Rick, but Carol, hearing a motorcycle and a truck in the distance, assures him that the weapons will not reach the camp. The two rescuers hastily hide with heavy machine guns in the truck, and Rick and Daryl give chase. One of the rescuers sets up a machine gun on a tripod and fires from the back of the truck, forcing Daryl to turn off the road. Rick stays on their tail. Yaga dodges walkers on the road, knocking down the sight of another savior and causing him to fall. While he regains his position and continues shooting at another truck, Rick swerves to the side, allowing Daryl, who has caught up with the pursuers, to open fire on the savior, hitting him several times and apparently killing him. Rick drives up to Yag's truck and jumps on board, stabs him in the belly and pushes him out of the car, and then smashes it against the barrier fence and throws it into the embankment. Daryl arrives at the scene and meets up with Rick while the two reflect on the condition of the machine guns. They approach the truck to check the condition of the remaining savior. Carol and Ezekiel and Jerry fight their way through the new walkers, and begins to weaken and begs the others to leave him, knowing that he will slow them down with his injury, but they refuse. Eventually, they reach a streambed polluted with barrels of industrial chemicals, where even more walkers wander. They manage to break through, but Ezekiel turns back, fighting off the approaching walkers and shouting for the others to leave him. Jerry refuses to leave, believing that it is his duty to defend his king, but also from Keel rejects his title, repeating that he is just some guy. Suddenly, Shiva jumps to his feet, splitting the walkers, throwing several aside out of force. While Isel watches helplessly, Shiva is overtaken and torn apart by a small herd, turning the water red, but giving the three enough time to escape. And she breaks down, completely devastated by the loss of her beloved friend and comrade. The three return to the kingdom beaten, bruised and broken. The assembled residents of the city learn that Ezekiel, Carol and Jerry are the only survivors of the fight. And he can't find the words and is unable to address the grieving crowd, limps to his room.